Continuing this series' expanded look at what the Age of the Ring mod provides in its factions, both those original to AOTR and expanded ones from vanilla ROTWK, it's worth noting up front again that these videos are not guides, merely faction highlights so you can see at a glance what some of the more interesting changes are, or all new features are. Needless to say, this is not an exhaustive demonstration or compendium of changes. Something important to note up front, though. In this series, sometimes you'll see oddities like abilities and powers instantly refreshing, or resource structures that produce insanely high resources. This is just a product of the mod's testing mode, which lets you change these values in-game for testing purposes, or demonstration purposes as in this series. So these changes should not be seen as accurately representing the mod and how it actually plays. In the previous episode, we covered in great detail AOTR's all-original faction of ROTWK. In this episode, we'll look at the differences between Vanilla's Mordor, a fun faction to play which brings the films to life pretty well, and AOTR's Overhauled, which brings in all kinds of great additions from the books to add even more life to it. As always, let's take a moment first to appreciate the amazing art overhaul. In Vanilla, Mordor's visual design lacks a cohesion or visual theme/identity. You've got your fortress, which obviously looks like something out of Mordor, as well as the Arrow Tower, but then all of the other structures are a kind of odd mix, like the Orc Pit being a literal hole in the ground, alongside the tent-like Haradrim Palace and Mumakil Pen, and a tavern for Corsairs. There just isn't a visual theme going for the faction. Ironically, the impermanence of the Haradrim Palace and Mumakil Pen both suggest more nomadic peoples always on the move, instead of being permanently stationed in Mordor, whereas the tavern is clearly a more permanent structure, but taverns in Mordor? The Mumakil Pen has some pretty cool designs on it which I don't recall seeing anywhere else, and the Mummic tusks are a great accent, and you gotta love the Black Serpent banners. Slaughterhouse is actually kind of interesting in its animation. It shows that Mordor uses younger beasts of Gorgoroth as food. In AOTR, the visual theme is remarkably consistent. Fortress now has a completely different look, a bit of a combination between Minas Morgul and Barad-dûr, and several other structures keep this theme going. The all-new armory is where you get most of your unit upgrades from now, having a kind of Cirith Ungol impression blended with the lava motif of Barad-dûr. The new slave farm replaces the classic slaughterhouse, now being more in line with the source material with the slaves of Nûrn, who toiled around the great inland sea within Mordor. You can even see the archer sentry keeping watch. The Easterling garrison replaces the Haradrim Palace to have a permanent look, inferring the Easterlings build structures within Mordor or close by, made of the black volcanic rock of that region. The Orcish Stronghold replaces the Orc Pit, maintaining the visual themes, and the Lumberyard now has an all-new visual overhaul. Where Vanilla Mordor's Orc Archers all have the same exact faces and attire, Age of the Ring makes them quite individualized. The other Orc units have a small degree of variation and individuality, but otherwise seem very bland and uninspired in their design. In AOTR, the Orcs now have more armor and face variants, like different helmets, and notice the round Mordor shield and the salvaged Gondor shields. You can barely make out the white tree symbol underneath the red eye painted over it. There's even new animations like sniffing, a great way to bring the source material to life. In vanilla, banners for all orc units and corsairs are all the same. The Easterling and Haradrim banners are individualized though. And I really like the banner carrier who has the bird helmet. In Age of the Ring, the banners of the orcs of Mordor naturally center on the Great Eye, but have several variants. And the men of Khand appropriately have different designs than those of the Easterlings, being from different regions. And upgrades show armor being individually placed on units instead of just painted on as in vanilla. But let's jump into the main stuff now. In vanilla and AOTR, Mordor plays a strong spam and monster game, though in vanilla it has a touch of Easterlings primarily for spear support, though their cavalry certainly comes in handy to stay even with most other factions. The Easterling spearmen in vanilla are your only source of spears, so if you start with an orc spam strategy, you are at a severe disadvantage against an enemy starting with cavalry until you take the time to build your Haradrim Palace. But if you start with the Easterlings, you're at a disadvantage against swordsmen, having none unless you build an orc pit. This is all negated in Age of the Ring, giving you more flexibility with your strategies, whether you want to have a spam-heavy orc strategy, or an Easterling-heavy one, or a mix. You're not forced to have both as in vanilla. Mordor has now been expanded to have a heavier influence of Easterlings to reflect the source material of the books better, such as the inclusion of the men from Khand and the Great Axemen, which is now a semi-heroic unit type. What's more is, almost all Easterling units have a special armor perk at higher levels which causes them to reflect a percentage of received damage back at their enemies, giving them an added advantage in combat. The Varyogs are your Tier 1 units from the Easterling garrison. Having a great speed buff and increased armor against arrow damage, these guys are amazing for relatively cheap hit-and-run tactics against key structures. Vanilla's Easterlings proper are relegated to only the spearmen, who are more or less basic Tier 1 spears who just have the porcupine formation. Pretty straightforward. Whereas in AOTR, they are more advanced Tier 1 spears, so have better stats. They also have the superior spear wall formation, which lets them move, in addition to the serrated armor. And their formation comes complete with their own marching animation now. In addition to the Haradrim cavalry, they also have the Haradrim archers, some of the deadliest in the game. Notice here their special barbed arrow ability, whether they do it automatically or you manually do it, is only a one-time use, though quite powerful. Things are a good deal different, however, in AOTR. These have been replaced by AOTR's Easterling archers, which are also some of the deadliest archers in that game. Not having special abilities besides the serrated armor, they have something more unique. Having an incredible upgrade which adds sword damage to their arrow damage, coupled with their very fast rate of fire, they can rip enemies to shreds in no time. And they come with cool leg armor and shields on their backs when upgraded to heavy armor. Vanilla's Haradrim Lancers are basic cavalry with no special abilities, but are vital for the faction to keep up with other factions' cavalry strategies. This is different in Age of the Ring, in which Mordor's only real source of cavalry are locked behind a spellbook power. Until that point, this temporary summon of the Haradrim Raiders is your only source of cavalry until you can afford the Golden Cataphracts. Replacing Vanilla's Tier 1 Haradrim Raiders, AOTR's Tier 3 elite unit, the Golden Cataphracts, are incredibly tough, and have an incredible design to boot. While not having any special abilities or upgrades, their stats make them every bit as intimidating as their appearance, especially with heavy armor. The Golden Axemen are one of the all-new semi-heroic unit types, something not in vanilla, covered in the first episode of the series. Limited to 3 on the battlefield, these units can buff their own damage while being immune to trample, get a permanent buff to their armor, and are one of the only sources of buffs specifically for the Easterlings, so are vital for a predominantly strong Easterling strategy. The great thing about the Golden Axemen is if you have all 3 together with your Varyogs or Easterlings, you can buff all surrounding Easterlings 3 times over. Use one and then the next. And that buff stacks with the special stance of the Easterling Spearmen, making them quite the bulwark, even apart from other buffs, like from the Drummer Trolls. You can see here I'm waiting for the 1st Battalion's ability to end before I activate the 2nd Battalion's, and so on to the 3rd. Vanilla's Orc Pit is the standard go-to structure, of course, housing the basic spam orcs, their archers, and the powerful Tier 2 black orcs. AOTR's equivalent, the Orcish Stronghold, has all of these units, but also the additional Orc Pikemen. The basic spam orcs are basically the same between games, but AOTRs are a little tougher. While both versions get the Horde bonus, AOTRs also get a permanent damage buff at level 2. Just grab your banner upgrade and they get a permanent buff. Orc Archers are the same across both games, having no special abilities other than the Horde bonus. The Orcs are a little expanded upon too, now including spam pikemen, so you're not over-reliant on Easterlings as in Vanilla. The Black Orcs are still part of the faction, but are quite different. In Vanilla, the Black Orcs are basically just souped-up normal orcs. Dangerous, but they don't have much else to them. In AOTR, they are an important part of maintaining your economy, functioning as the necessary replacement for the Corsairs, which are moved to Haradwyth so they can steal resources by damaging structures just like the Corsairs. Tier 2 units under the command of a new hero, Shagrat, they get important leadership from him to keep fighting and disrupting your enemy's eco. There's also the elite Morgul orcs, Sauron's own special breed. Seen several times in the series already, these orcs can debuff enemy armor with every single hit, come with heavy armor by default, and can get into shield wall formation, making them quite formidable. And they have their own unique marching animations. Notice their more squat-legged movements befitting the orcs. Vanilla's Black Riders are one of the top heroic units of the game, being quite fast and nimble so they can reach target enemies like heroes quickly and pursue relentlessly, especially with the Morgul Blade and debuffing enemies along the way. A perfect supplement to any cavalry strategy or to just go solo with. Black Riders, being cavalry, obviously work best when trampling enemies, and because they debuff their armor, this works even better. But they can't plow through clumps too well, and they get bogged down by the enemy, especially in their special line stands. Black Riders do not remove leadership, only debuff that leadership a bit, so ideally you want to use the Morgul Blade to target the source of the leadership ASAP to remove it from play, otherwise they can be quite vulnerable just in direct melee combat. These guys can stand toe-to-toe in a one-for-one melee against even tough heroic units like Dol Amroth Knights for the Men of the West faction. And as a bonus, they can turn enemy heroes into wights. The Witch King's Vanguard is AOTR Mordor's heroic unit, which replaces Vanilla's Black Riders. You'll see why later. The Vanguard have the versatility of going on foot or on horseback. The Vanguard debuff enemy armor per hit, which can stack with other debuffs. These guys can glide through enemy units while on horseback, which is great for escaping enemy ranks or pursuing a key target to the death. They also get to buff their armor and deal knockback. So while these guys don't quite have the nimbleness of Vanilla's Black Riders, their speed buff makes them briefly faster so as to flee from sticky situations. This power also lets them cut right through impossible enemies and get to vulnerable targets. Notice that certain heroes like Boromir can actually knock these guys back, but their speed power makes them immune to knockback, and their other power lets them do the same to the Knights of Dol Amroth as well as other heroic units. And while they don't have the Morgul Blade, notice the green glow beneath both Boromir and the Knights, indicating they are indeed being debuffed. A much more powerful ability than the Morgul Blade, and this does indeed stack with most other debuffs. And they have the greater versatility to get off their steeds in order to deal with intractable enemies like spearmen. The Black Riders of Vanilla do not have this ability. And the siege engines are the same across both games, though naturally are visually improved in AOTR. The trolls in both Vanilla and AOTR are virtually the same, being the same tier status and having the same abilities, playstyles, etc. As for the Mumakil of Vanilla, though, in Vanilla, Mumakil don't get much attention in Mordor, though are fun to use. Now that they play such a heavy role in Haradwaith, they've been removed from Mordor but replaced by the great beasts of Gorgoroth, seen briefly when Grond is led to the gates of Minas Tirith. They can stampede groups of enemies and heroes, get a carriage filled with orc archers, can throw flaming grog like dwarven battle wagons, and cause enemies to flee. These have largely the same mechanical function as Vanilla Mumakil to support strong sieges, while making Mordor come to life as its own region that much more. Grond, the Hammer of the Underworld, the ultimate in siege in either game, has undergone a massive stats overhaul in Age of the Ring, this being reflected by now being locked behind a few extra steps to acquire it. So what exactly is this massive stat boost? Well, the biggest one is, it's no longer fragile. This has always been one of the most frustrating aspects of it in Vanilla, given how expensive it is. In Age of the Ring, it's every bit as fearsome as it should be. And this only makes sense given how many hoops you have to jump through to get it in AOTR, as was mentioned earlier. One last look at the structures. The Arrow Tower has been totally overhauled. Like the dwarves, you can choose between several different upgrades for various strategies.
We've expanded this building.
Before moving on to the heroes, there are a few notable changes to the spellbook which definitely changed the way the faction is played. Some powers like the Worm and the legendary Balrog have been removed and given over to other factions like the Goblins. Vanilla's early game power, Eye of Sauron, is a classic, able to provide scouting vision, find stealth units like Gollum, and also buff units. In AOTR, the Eye of Sauron is a late game power to be covered in a moment. Vanilla's Eye is replaced by a great addition from the books, the Trackers of Cirith Ungol, which try to find Frodo and Sam while in Mordor. It's also a scouting power, but now it debuffs enemies as well.
Anyone got any fences?
In vanilla there is the classic land buff Tainted Land which so many evil factions get, but AOTR's Mordor does not have it at all, which greatly changes the way the faction is played, as you must rely more on your stackable debuffs. This has been replaced by an original early game power, the Cracks of Doom, which does persistent damage in a wide radius, so is a great way to get the edge on clumped up enemies in a battle. Vanilla's Untamed Allegiance power can take over creep layers, but also has a more permanent feature in being able to drastically increase the production speed of your monsters. This is a pretty incredible power to be able to spam out trolls for a whole minute, incentivizing monster strategies. This has been replaced with the power covered earlier to provide light cavalry and unlock the more powerful Golden Cataphracts and Golden Axemen. As for Vanilla's Barrage, it's an extremely powerful AoE attack that can easily wipe out whole armies and weaken or destroy enemy structures. This has been replaced by Shelob, which is essentially a hero killer and unit disruptor.
Looks like I'll see
And the Worm power has been replaced with Wraiths on Wings, a double summon of Nazgul on their Fell Beasts to be covered a little bit later in the video. Finally, the Eye of Sauron power replacing the Balrog reflects the sheer power and terror of the source material. Whereas with the Eye of Sauron, the moment it's summoned, it stuns all units across the entire field of battle and does extremely fast, persistent damage to everything it targets, including heroes. It also slows down those enemies and buffs your own units. It's easily one of the most devastating powers in the game and really brings the raw might of Mordor to life. Otherwise, the powers of Mordor remain pretty much the same as in vanilla, so Mordor can still spam orcs of all tier levels, which is extremely handy for the legions of Morgul tier 3 orcs, and can buff out resource production of a farm, etc. Though you get 200% increase in AOTR versus 150 in vanilla. Vanilla's hero roster consists of 5 heroes, 3 of whom are the Nazgul, so they have a heavy influence in vanilla for that reason alone. In AOTR, it's a bit different. Its hero roster has received a few new heroes as well, such as the orc captains from Cirith Ungol, Shagrat, and Gorbag, who change up Mordor's strategy in some interesting ways. Gorbag is a stealth hero and a hero killer, able to debuff enemy hero armor by a considerable amount, whilst also stunning him and doing bleeding damage, which is a great twist on the poison mechanic.
Get away from me. Stop your squealing, you dunghill rat. The enemy is on us! I'm gonna bleed you. None can escape from Eli's gaze.
Shagrat leads your tier 2 black orcs, capable of harassing the enemy with some great buffs, enabling their ability to pillage from slain foes and structures to fuel Mordor's economy, and can even buff out your arrow towers if you play more defensively. This hero roster also includes a new troll hero, Moloch, the giant troll who battles Aragorn in the movies at the Black Gate, who can buff out all troll units, making Mordor's already formidable monster game that much deadlier. He's also a formidable hero killer in his own right. Monster units cannot be buffed at all in vanilla, except Ents with Treebeard, so this is a big change. Here's an example of the difference his leadership can make from my video, The Complete Guide to Attribute Modifiers. You can see more detail there. In vanilla, this powerful self buff belongs to Gothmog, who is your early game hero, being its hero killer and possessing a powerful leadership affecting only orcs. But this is really about all he's capable of in vanilla. He is, after all, an early game hero in that. In AOTR, Gothmog plays a much bigger role, being now a more mid to late game hero. For starters, you have to get a fortress upgrade to unlock him, and you have to have him to unlock Grond. This alone is a nice way to reflect how he was an important lieutenant for Mordor, but looking at his roster of abilities brings this home that much more. Like in the movies, he now has a mount to make him more versatile. While he lacks the powerful self-buff from vanilla, this is more than made up for in his other abilities. Having now a powerful leadership affecting only orcs, but an additional powerful buff affecting all units, not just orcs, these two modifiers come in handy with his double summon of elite pikemen. The modifiers stacking with your spellbook buff, the Mouth of Sauron's buff, and the all-new fortress buff for an incredible doom stack which can quickly take out an undefended fortress. One of many examples of how AOTR's attribute modifier system has been greatly overhauled to reward players for their creativity. And befitting the Lieutenant of Mordor, he does buff all of its monster units, which does indeed stack with Moloch's buff. The Mouth of Sauron is a bit different from game to game. In vanilla, he's an early game hero who can debuff enemies and remove their leadership, zap enemies with a ray of light like Gandalf's Light Blast, and make enemies hostile towards one another. Whereas in AOTR, he gets to both buff your units whilst also debuffing the enemies, so you always want to use that power in the middle of a fight. He gets the ability to fully refresh hero abilities as well, which, as you will see shortly, can be devastating. But of course, the cream of the crop has always been the ring wraiths, and they've received some fairly game-changing overhauls. For starters, they reflect the books more by being able to permanently buff one another, which is added to by an all-new fortress upgrade, the Morgul Spire. While on horseback, they have a few great new abilities, such as a massive speed boost to hunt down fleeing heroes, and something pulled straight out of the books, the Black Breath, which causes persistent splash damage to enemies around them. Furthermore, they now have the ability to go on foot, or horseback, or on their fell beasts. Appropriately, they are the only units in the game to be able to do all three. This single-handedly makes them the most versatile units in the game. If you get the Fell Beast upgrade though, you can only switch back and forth with being on foot, so it incentivizes you to strategize carefully, especially given its cost per ring rate. This all is further supplemented by one of the faction's new spellbook powers, which temporarily summons 2 wraiths on their Fell Beasts for a truly base-destroying 5 Fell Beast combo. Mordor never looked so good or so deadly. Recall that in vanilla the ring wraiths are much more simplified, being mostly useful for their fell beasts not being able to go on horseback at all, and being so weak on foot even while debuffing the enemy makes them quite vulnerable. What's more is their debuffs are replaced by the Witch Kings due to vanilla's limiting attribute modifier mechanics, whereas in AOTR they stack, making the Nazgul feel truly terrifying as they melt armor and damage of your enemy. Like here, where Tier 2 Black Orcs progressively take down the elite Tier 3 Iron Hills Dwarves, no buffs or anything else. Vanilla's Witch King has always been quite powerful, having some potent abilities, such as being able to put enemy hero abilities in cooldown, essentially making the fight one-sided in your favor. But this ability has been slightly changed in AOTR and expanded with other abilities just as deadly. One of them is the passive ability to reflect a percentage of damage received back at his enemies, and this includes heroes. Being the Witch King of Angmar, he also comes now with a potent splash damage frost ability, which only gets more powerful as he levels up. And it stacks with the Black Breath of the other Nazgul for a truly devastating army-destroying combo. Like the Lesser Nazgul, he can also go abroad on horseback or take to the skies. On horseback, along with the all-new Morgul Vanguard heroic unit, he completes the picture of a cavalry force from hell to terrorize your enemies with. But more importantly, he now has a nuke ability, which, if you can level up the Mouth of Sauron, can be used twice in a row. And as if all of this wasn't cool enough, if you get Sauron as the ring hero, he now has a new ability to summon the remaining 4 Nazgul so you can get all 9. Talk about incentivizing playing with ring heroes turned down for a change. There's so many great things in this mod which bring Middle-earth to life so accurately, but this is easily one of the best. As you've seen, Mordor is a bit of a different beast compared to its vanilla counterpart. More Easterlings, better orcs, tougher trolls, and all 9 Nazgul are just some of the most fun features of this overhaul. Well, this just about wraps up this video. The next episode will be all about the Woodland Realm, the first of 3 elven factions to come out of AOTR's overhaul of Vanilla's singular faction of the elves. In the meantime, if you haven't already, why not download this amazing mod? It's fast, free, and easy. Download link is in the description, and I have a great installation guide on my channel here.